welcome to SHOWstudio. It's our second roundup panel of the day, but we're moving very swiftly from menswear over to couture. Well, I say that, but then actually this was an interesting couture week because there was all sorts on show. There was a lot of menswear on show at the couture week, because we had Vetements showing and they showed men's and women's. There was also Justin O'Shea debuted his collection for Brioni during the couture week, and then obviously alongside that we had the kind of typical shows, the Dior's, the Chanel's and what have you. So super interesting couture week in terms of what was on show, but I think that really sums up the spirit of fashion at the moment, where no one's quite sure how they should be showing, where they should be showing, what they should be showing. Exactly, it's fascinating. It was also an interesting couture season because it also summarises what we were talking about before we went live, which is about houses not having designers or designers leaving certain houses. Constant sort of revolving door that seems to be happening in fashion. I'm sure we'll dive into all of those topics whilst also sort of giving our verdict on some of the shows. Got an amazing set of panellists with me, really lovely big panel to help discuss and debate. But before we kick things off, I'll let everyone introduce themselves, just starting with you, Stephen.
Hi, I'm Stephen Jones and I'm a Milner.
As you can tell.
I don't think you need to introduce yourself. But on the other hand, I'm Mimma Viglezio. And I'm a creative consultant and the editor of Lula magazine.
I'm Deborah Milner and I'm a couture designer.
I'm Frances Corner, I'm head of the London College of Fashion.
I'm Hilary Alexander and I'm editor-at-large for Hello Fashion Monthly.
Hi everyone. So what did we make of this couture week? Because as I said, it was an interesting one because it actually kicked off with a brand who didn't show any couture apart from Juicy Couture, as we were saying, which was Vetements, and they'd been invited to kind of as a guest to show. And it did seem like a strange couture week. It wasn't so much about couture, it was about these kind of spectacles and these happenings. And you're kind of a veteran of couture, you've done amazing work with different couture designers. What do you make of all this change?
Well, I think the Chambre Syndicale, who runs the couture shows, know that they have to expand their repertoire of designers that they have showing there. And for example, over the past few seasons, they've included like jewellers at the end of the week, and now there's all sorts of different people showing there. And I just think that keeps the whole thing alive. It used to be that you had to have a workroom with 25 permanent employees, and all those rules still do exist for full members, but there's many other people like Vetements. I mean, even I think Versace is an invited member.
Yes.
They're not,
And Valentino, I think.
Yeah. And Ralph and Russo and Giles, for example, was showing there as, aside.
Membre invité.
It's also the only fashion week where actual clients are there, customers. So people are sitting front row that actually have the money to buy it. So I'm not surprised that everybody tries to get on that wagon, because it's not only for the press, it's not only for the industry, it's also for customers. Speaking
cynically, there are so many less shows that if you show during couture, you are much more likely to get sort of written coverage in a newspaper. You know, if you show during the Women's Fashion Week, you don't even know if you'll get coverage because there's so many shows. But if you show during couture, then you're very likely to be written about. It's interesting to get your perspective, because obviously as a couture designer, it's you know more than anyone like what it means to actually call something couture. And do you worry a bit? There's always been this thing with brands calling themselves couture, just as almost like a label. But do you worry that people that the word couture is losing its meaning because of people showing in that week?
I think ultimately it won't lose its meaning, because eventually it's always got to be about a certain quality, a certain fineness of fabric or whatever. But it is exciting to have all these other designers showing and bringing that sort of youth and exuberance to it. So I think that can only be a good thing for the other couture brands. I mean, I know what you mean. There's a proliferation of the word couture across the internet and writing, and maybe it doesn't mean the same, but
it gets bandied around so much couture level,
but they
couture
like luxury was a few years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But they only say couture.
They don't say,
and they're not
couture.
saying haute.
Yeah.
And I mean, in the past, we've had people calling themselves demi couture and luxe couture.
But
there's been derivations.
Sorry, isn't it still called haute couture in Paris?
Well, it is.
It's
Yes,
English that have
but
problems.
Some of the brands that are sort of showing are just simply using the word couture without saying haute.
Yeah. Demi was only what's her name with Hussein
Shalai.
What's her name?
Gogo Ashkenazi.
Yeah, exactly.
I think
she called it Demi.
It's a bit like a redefining about what couture is. It's about a thinking that's what I think is really interesting. It's putting all these different ideas together rather than just saying it in a very narrow way, a bit like fashion. You know, what is the fashion show now? Those are the, you know, what is fashion, what is luxury? And for me, it feels as though it's been reflected in this sort of higher echelon, if I want a better way of describing it. There's a similar sort of thinking going on and a sort of pushing, and that's what I think is really exciting, and certainly from the student's perspective. You know, the fact that you've got Vetmore or you've got Giles, or it's a bit like, well, then what is it? What is it about thinking about your clothes? It has a much closer level of investigation and pushing of an idea. You know, what is it that's going to make it couture?
That's interesting.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, I think that is the case. I was reading about sort of Giles and his reasoning for showing it, and his reasoning, it seemed to be kind of a business reason, that he found that he did have he was making so many couture dresses for private clients anyway. So I think that's what's interesting, is as much as it's a sensibility about fabrication or design, a lot of it is also like how to structure your business. And it's really fascinating. On one of the men's panels yesterday, we had one of the recent graduates from Central St Martin's from the MA, and he was saying that actually, I think there were 5 students from the MA who wanted to start their own brands, but quite a lot of them were doing it in a way where they weren't going to show, they weren't going to do fashion week at all, but they were already working directly with private clients, and that was how they were starting their brands. And that's
bespoke.
Exactly.
I mean, it's because couture is still a collection with a point of view of the designer, then which is tried on how many times. I mean, that's the difference. Then you make it on the body of the client, right?
Yes.
But it's still a collection that it's first designed.
But I think also for young graduates, and I think again we've got some sort of setting up collectors wanting to sell in a different way. It's the way you start. You start, you know, and because you have to get the work out there. But you're not having to invest in a show. It's you're learning your craft out of college, if you see what I mean.
I thought the interesting thing, particularly about this Haute Couture season, was the emphasis on workmanship and the number of couturiers who really wanted to display and emphasise the inside of the garment and how it was put together. Givenchy Giles was similar because it was very close up. Chanel actually had the whole kind of atelier there, stitching and seaming and embroidery and beading. So maybe that was a way of distancing
themselves and the ready-to-wear
real haute couture from the kind of usurpers, if you like. Or
Stephen, you whispered something at the beginning that I'm not sure speak that, but it was very interesting. You said the word couture is now what luxury was until
I mean,
because luxury probably is not luxury anymore, right?
I mean, there's always a word which is the byword for fashion, and it's the fashionable word that any sub-editor will use on the top of a collar. I wanted to say that it's interesting you're saying about your students wanting to go back and sell directly to customers. I mean, this is what fashion always was. That's the correct way. When there's that link between the creator and the person who's buying it and the client, that's when fashion makes sense. In a funny way, the whole ready-to-wear business, which really started in the late 70s or early 80s, that was the anomaly because everybody thought, well, they could sell things to department stores all over the world. But actually, in a way, people don't want that. They want something more special than that. And we're seeing a return to the original idea of couture.
I was just going to say about Giles, because I remember quite a few years ago he came in to be a sort of designer in residence at the college, and was great with the students. And I think if you think about his sort of ready-to-wear collections and now how he's evolved, I think one of the things what's really difficult about the industry at the moment is this constant sort of pressure to deliver, and that idea of evolving as a designer is the thing that can get lost, whereas you look at the collection that he's showing here in comparison to perhaps something 5 years ago when he was showing his ready-to-wear in London, you can really see a sort of growth and a sort of development in his thinking and also the way things are made, and that's the thing you hope that people will aspire to grow into couture, which in a way, and I think and also for our students, understanding that you can't just go from graduating to, and the idea of everything having to be, you're an instant success. In a way, that's what's exciting to see somebody like Giles evolving.
And I think it means that people have to have a certain level of pragmatism and consider that there has to be someone who wants to wear it and buy it and live that life that you're dreaming up, because I do think that has got a bit lost. It's almost seen as it's that problem of commercial being seen as a kind of like dirty word within fashion. But I do think that it's so rare that you read an article with a designer where they genuinely talk about people that wear. They often say things like, my woman is this, or, you know, like, I'm always thinking about this kind of a girl. But it's always this like vision of someone. But I actually find that focus on real people who engage with your clothes is so important, and I think young designers need to think about that more. That often feels like the consumer is so missing from a lot of fashion.
I mean, I think one designer who's really got that nailed is Michael Kors, though.
Yeah.
Because he totally lives the Palm Springs, Aspen lifestyle. He has dinner with them, lunch with them.
Well, that's why Olivia Riesling
That's what he puts in his campaigns.
He knows exactly what they need.
Boats in private jets. With the Testino treatment.
It's also why we were talking about this morning, but it's also why Gosha works. And I think I wrote that in one of my reviews over the season with the menswear. I said that the Bauman model is actually remarkably similar to the Gosha model, which is all about having this like genuine group of people around you who live the genuine, like the lifestyle that you're actually promoting. They actually live it, and you feed into them and they feed into you, and it's really similar.
The genuine life in social media, though.
Yeah, but exactly, but they live that life that you're promoting.
Couture, when it's now after the week, it's actually more like that than any other part of fashion, because they do have customers that go there and they have 10 tries, and you know, they want it to be made only in 3 sizes and not more. I mean, this is very expensive stuff. So I don't know if Carl is present at those fitting or Riccardo is present. That I don't know. You probably know.
I don't think Carl is. He sort of sends a team. I think.
But he's petite main, you know. But
he will do a sketch. Say, for example, you have the outfit from the runway. Then the client will come in and say, "I'd like to have the same outfit in pink or something," and he will do that sketch in the way.
But then none of the designers are actually ever present with the customer spend
sure.
100 rand.
Really,
I think
they're
they
busy
maybe
doing
go
their
even,
social media.
They maybe even go out for
Instagramming.
dinner with someone who spends that much money.
I
Come
think
on.
so.
But
They have a personal
But the
relationship with
premiers
Carrier and Carder.
who work within those ateliers, they are, like, you see that in the Dior and I film. I love that bit where they kind of have a fight because they need her to work on the collection, but she's got to go.
She needs to be.
She's got to go to see the client, and that's really fascinating.
Yes.
But
because that's for the technical reasons, but I'm sure that for the emotional reasons, the designer with the top customer who spends like buy 5 couture outfit every season, they have a relationship. They're on happy Christmas or
I mean,
happy
I'm sure
birthday terms.
if Beyonce wants 4 or 5 outfits,
But she's a celebrity.
Ricardo isn't
That's
going
different.
to say, "Oh, I'll send one of my assistants."
Yeah, but she's a celebrity.
Yes.
What
Yeah.
about someone unknown but very
Well,
rich?
I think it would be the same thing if
The
they're going to
same.
spend £500,000 or £1 million.
Well,
Sometimes.
What
I
about
think
you?
I think sometimes, you know, it's like, does Beyonce's schedule fit in with Ricardo? Maybe it doesn't, so they have to send the fitters. And during the fitting, maybe Beyonce and her stylist can be more honest with the fitters and say, no, I don't like this, I want this to be made in a different way, or the colour doesn't work.
That's
So
interesting.
if the designer's there, you know, she can't say to Ricardo, well, I think it's a bit short, I'd like to be a bit longer.
But that's why I'm talking about a relationship, not the fitting. But I'm talking about a relationship, lunches and texts for happy birthday.
There was a good piece
It's a
that
different
Claudia
thing.
Croft wrote in the Sunday Times, I think this weekend or the
Yes.
weekend before, about those clients and about how they were, like, couture clients have traditionally been incredibly private, like, you know, very, very hard to get quotes from them, and there's a really good documentary. I talk about it like every couture season in the hope that people will watch it on YouTube, called The Secret World of Couture, and you can get it. It's really, really brilliant. They speak to some of the clients, but it's so hard to get access to those women. But she says that what was interesting this season is those women were more visible. You know, as you said, they are at the shows, but she said it is through social media. There was, like, you know, there was a real thing for trying the dresses on, you know, backstage or after, taking pictures, sharing that, and I think that's interesting to see how that will change couture, because I love how quiet it is and how you never really know who's
Yes, there definitely is the idea that you shouldn't really be telling the press exactly who all your clients are.
Very much
It's
so,
not
yeah.
very cool to do that.
They don't, but then if the client takes a selfie, that's
Oh yeah,
choice,
well, that's up to her, isn't it?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
I think Dior was one of the first really to focus on making sure that the press knew where all the clients were sitting.
Well, he was the first.
Oh, really?
Dior himself
yes.
was the first person to employ an American publicist in 1948.
quite modern.
Yeah, I mean, he knew that was the way it was going to go, and he made big glamorous clothes that were newsworthy for, you know, famous international stars like Marlene. But this whole idea of discreet fashion, that's what they're paying for. If they want to publicise something, they'll do it themselves.
But do you think that discretion is still something that people see as luxurious? Do you think a younger consumer is seduced by that idea of or do you not?
Yes.
Do you think so? Yeah.
I think so, yes.
That's
I think it probably depends who
At
it
that level,
is,
yes.
really.
I think it
But I
depends.
don't think everybody wants to be all over the media
No.
necessarily.
Especially at that level, they're not that young. They don't have.
I was
that
just going to
money.
say, a lot of the clients are really over 50.
Yeah.
Probably.
I mean, whether they're Middle Eastern or Asian clients, the idea that they're going to appear in the press, for them, is completely horrific. They do these are private clothes for private events for their group of friends.
And then there are the European that never pay taxes, so they can show they're spending their money. I mean, it sounds like a joke, but it's not.
Tell me
not
about,
really-
what was your couture week like? Were you there for
Yes.
how many days were you?
I was there for a week beforehand, and working with clients, and I went to quite a few shows. And it's interesting how the men's shows flow into the women's shows.
Yeah. It is this thing at the men's shows where I really noticed it this season is people are always like, if you write about men's and women's, people tend to say, oh, you're staying for couture, blah, blah. But this season, a lot of the men's press, people were saying to each other, "Are you staying for couture?" And it was obviously because it is newly relevant to a men's writer as well, because of Brioni and Vetmont and what have you. So that was interesting.
Yeah, and Dolce & Gabbana are showing men's haute couture as well.
It's what do we think of that? Because it's difficult with the men's, because you used the word bespoke before, but people always talk about the men's bespoke rather than men's couture.
Well, bespoke is the Savile Row term for having something made to measure.
Yeah.
Haute couture is the female term.
Term,
So
yeah.
it's just language.
But it's funny, isn't it?
No, because sorry, no, I don't.
Do you disagree?
Yeah, I do in a sense. I think that couture again, it's a collection that then it's fitted on the client. While bespoke, the client say, "I want that fabric. Can you do it without sleeves?" It's not. It's bespoke. I mean, it's the client's idea. Isn't that different?
No, I mean, haute couture is about the client's idea.
It is
Mona
in the
Bismarck
end.
used to get Balenciaga to make her tennis shorts for her.
That's Balenciaga bespoke, no?
No, that's Balenciaga haute couture.
But these are collections that are.
But then
But
if
then
you
the
go
client-
into the
And
ateliers,
these clients, the
Come
lady
up
who's
with
going to
it,
buy
yeah.
the dress in the middle, which has got a picture of the photograph of the English embassy in Paris on it, she will go in and she'll say, well, I want to buy that, and I'd love to have a little dress for my daughter in a matching fabric.
Okay.
And, could we have
sorry.
some car seats?
I like that
Can we
style,
have
but I
some
want-
car
I
seat
want it in
covers
plain
made to match,
fabric.
please?
Yeah.
Or could I have the Eiffel Tower rather than the
Rather
English
than-
Embassy?
that's right,
Exactly.
yes,
But
yeah.
you do see that if you go into an
Yeah.
atelier,
Or the Blue
Definitely.
Mosque. Or,
Yeah.
what's going on in
exactly.
there is, it doesn't even look like some of the houses. I was really
Yeah.
interested when I've gone to couture ateliers, is sometimes you're like, this doesn't even look like the aesthetic of the house, but this is what your client wants, so they're making
Okay,
it, and
so
that's really, really interesting.
I'm completely wrong. No, I've learned something.
But I think haute couture was always, I mean, it was it's like this idea of the little dressmaker, but
Yeah.
amped up to as much as possible.
Yeah.
But it is, of course, it's about the great creation as well, but it's the joining of the client's idea and the designer's idea.
So what you see on the catwalk is just a
An
suggestion.
indication.
That's
An
suggestion.
indication.
Yeah,
Suggestion.
yeah, it's suggestion.
Okay.
I
They
went
will
once
never be
to-
produced.
But think about
Some
it.
they
Oh, yes,
will,
they will if
will
somebody
sometimes.
orders it. And sometimes people
Especially
do.
the celebrities at the Met.
But
they
not
wear
every,
it.
yeah, but not everybody is going to order it.
When I went
exactly
to the
as it is.
Valentino atelier, I think they were making, it was so they'd just shown the couture season before this, and I think I saw about 10 dresses being made, and 3 of them related to the show, I think. And
But
some
then
of them
they
were literally
called-
identical to the ones
Then
in
in
the
the
show.
press they call she's wearing custom Valentino. That does mean couture.
No, that's more like a kind of design collaborative thing, so it could be like a dress from the ready-to-wear that they've...
Okay.
I went round Elie Saab's atelier once in Beirut, and I don't think I've ever seen so many different mannequins or dummies.
Yeah.
I love all the...
Of
Yeah,
such
oh my god, that's the most
extraordinary
amazing
sizes.
thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So the
I mean,
like
yeah,
the various
yeah.
clients.
Yeah, the
bodies.
clients.
All there,
Yeah,
with boobs and
yeah,
very curvaceous and
yeah.
all shapes
So
and sizes.
different. It's really
Nothing like
amazing
a
to see.
supermodel.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's funny. I would
Yeah.
like to
And
see
what's so great is that at Elie Saab they would reproportion all the embroidery
Yes.
and
Yeah.
shade it on the
Yes.
sides to
Yes.
trim a few
Well,
centimetres off
that's
the
what
clothes.
someone said in that atelier, where they were kind of being flippant. They obviously didn't mean this, but I remarked on how different all the busts were and all the dummies were, and they said, but if you're a great designer, the dresses all look the same in the end when worn on the women. Like, so as you were saying, like you move the embroidery, so it means that actually
You adapted.
the bodies all kind of end up, like the dress works on that body and it doesn't look different on that body as it would on a different one. I thought that was really interesting. It's like they completely change it.
I mean, the biggest dilemma when I was working with McQueen and running their couture studio was how were we going to get what the client wanted with the design that they liked and then make it still look like McQueen at the end of the day.
And
That's the big.
what was the solution?
Well, it was
Skills.
various things. It was
Clever
skills.
cutting.
It was looking at
Yeah.
the cutting. It was what fabrics you chose. And then thinking, oh well, you might do a sleeve that looked nice, but it doesn't look very McQueen. We're going to have to change that a bit. So.
And what do we think about this like revolving door of designers? Because that worries me when I think we kind of in the ready to wear thing. I think it's easier to understand, but I actually think if you're a couture client and it's something like Dior, where you've got, I think it's amazing. Maria Grazia who was formerly at Valentino has gone there now. It's a female creative director. How brilliant. But I do think if you're a couture client who's sort of been a patron of Dior for that long, and then you've got used to Mr. Simmons' aesthetic, and now you've got to get used to a different one. Do we think it is going to have an effect?
Well, she'll bring her clients with her.
Yeah.
She'll bring her Valentino.
Or will
clients
she
with
though?
her.
Because then.
Yeah,
Because
Paolo.
the Paolo may
Yeah.
keep them.
Well,
They can afford both.
I was just going to say they probably can afford
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But I think what you're saying is very important, and we were discussing this before. I think it applies to ready to wear a little bit too, because this is expensive stuff. And like when you read in the morning that Peter Copping is out after having done one collection, one bridal and one resort, you feel there's no respect for the customer, but also for the designer. Whatever happened there, it's like if it doesn't work in one season, you don't even give it time to work.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I don't know,
difficult,
it's very
isn't it? It's
sad.
not
Yeah.
really fair in a sense.
No,
If you
but
make
we
the
don't know.
commitment-
Maybe he left, but if he left, probably they wouldn't let him do what he wanted to do.
Well, I think also for me,
sad.
I mean, that idea about what does a customer think? I mean, the idea that you can just quickly change the designer and you're still going to have the same relationship. You can't, because you do build up a relationship with the aesthetic, with the ideas, the concept. And I would have thought something like couture, that's even more the case than it is for ready to wear.
And learning the new techniques,
and learning the
probably.
new techniques,
Yeah.
and actually building up that sort of sense that you go regularly, you
Yeah.
order, you're interested, you know that aesthetic is something that you respond to. Otherwise, it's just like, well, what does it mean? I can go anywhere.
But maybe the traditional Dior customer of recent years will be used to it, because this will be the third designer she's had
Yes.
in
Or maybe it's
just
gone.
over a year.
But I mean that's the danger if you keep revolving, that actually then you do go somewhere where you can build up a relationship.
I'm sure the houses are looking to find that designer that they can then keep for a period
then
of
why
time.
do
I'm
they
sure it's
put
not
them on,
really.
like,
2-year
I don't think they want
contracts?
to keep changing. I can't imagine it's good for
Are they?
business,
Because
really.
they're now making contracts, 1-year contracts, to make sure it doesn't cost them too much if it doesn't work. Designers apparently are asking for very short contracts. It has completely changed. And look at Peter Copping. Who better can be
For Oscar,
the hair of
for
Oscar
Oscar,
de la Renta?
There isn't
It's
anyone.
like, he was made by Oscar in a way.
Well, I
And
think there
now-
must have been some argument or something.
Yes.
That's anyway, because he's the perfect designer for that.
Yeah.
And,
Perfect.
you know,
And it'll be very hard to find someone else.
and if it is not working, as obviously it was not working, I mean, I think Peter was working, maybe the management wasn't working, or something was not functioning properly within the company. I mean, one can only just
It's
imagine.
very different. I mean, it's, like we were saying before, it's a bit like being a football manager. It's like if you've not won everything within the first 6 months, therefore you're out. And in a way, I think also for something as significant as this sort of creative director, you've got to build up the relationship with all the people helping to create the clothes, understanding and interpreting what your vision. You know, that takes time. You can't just sort of land there. And also how do you channel what the ideas of the house are going to be, and you can't, the creative process doesn't work like that.
And even if you think of, designers working with their own brand, and you look at all their collections, not every collection is a stellar collection.
Of course,
Yeah,
it can't be. It can't be.
exactly,
It can't be.
There's
You've
always
all
some
had
that
it.
are better than
Yeah,
others,
exactly.
and a couple
And
of
then-
dud ones or whatever.
And then there's the economy. There are times where people spend less or more, and then there are so many brands
So
that
many
people
brands,
are like,
yeah.
oh, I like that
But
Dior
I-
collection, and they cheat for one season. I mean, it's very hard.
But I think that malaise, which is in the upper echelons of the ready-to-wear business, for example, at Oscars, they're extremely expensive clothes. It's only a very small step to haute couture, and that's why somebody like Giles can make much more real business from haute couture than doing very expensive ready-to-wear. And this is why he went to show in Paris. And
McQueen is at the same. Yeah. McQueen, I think that's why McHugh became sort of the wearable McQueen. Am I wrong? Because the fashion show collection was...
Well, it's almost like couture.
It's couture. The prices are couture.
Yeah.
So.
It's
that
more
last collection.
It's more haute couture
Oscar
than much
I guess, right?
haute couture.
But you mentioned the football manager. I mean, in a similar way, the football manager has also got to make sure that the players are being put in the right spot that suits the way they play. I mean, unlike Roy Hodgson, who put them all in the wrong place. But so similarly with a designer, do you know what I mean? You play to his or her strengths. And I think maybe the problems come when a designer is being pushed to do
things
X, Y, Z, which he physically doesn't feel any emotion for or
doesn't believe in. And it's this.
And then you get, sort of square peg and round hole situation.
But except also that the football manager doesn't have clients, customers who
They've
have
got
to
fans.
buy.
They've got fans, and they've got television rights. It's so much money.
But that's why, just to kind of focus on some of the specific issues, that's why Chanel is so amazing, because like Karl Lagerfeld, you're never going to get someone who's a house spirit. Like, the amount of time he's been at Fendi, the amount of time he's been at... It's insane. It was so weird, because obviously just for couture, it was the Paris men's shows, and people were celebrating the fact that Kim Jones had been at Louis Vuitton for 5 years, and like...
5 years. It's a blink of an eye.
The thing is, that's a really long amount of time in fashion now. So actually, it is a real achievement. But then you realise in the context of someone like Karl Lagerfeld how short that is. But then in the context of everything else, it's a really long time. Like, the fact that he feasibly could get to 10 years somewhere, it's just like kind of unthinkable now.
And Armani.
And
I mean, Valentino until...
Armani, it's his own.
It's his own. I think that's
well, Karl is not his own. It's more of an achievement.
But when
Mr. Armani, it's his own name and company.
But when Karl went to Chanel, it was Karl is now Chanel. It wasn't forever.
And he,
that
Chanel.
idea. He became it, and it became him.
Till death.
But then that's what happened with Saint Laurent and Eddie Smith. So why do you think designers are moving around? So you work with so many designers so closely. Why do you think everyone's leaping about like salmon?
Well, for a start, most people, they're leaping about because they're not the houses they created, which is something, because if you look at the history of fashion, you had houses that were created in the 40s and 50s and 60s, and those had a certain generation of designers who had to be replaced. Then there's all the ready-to-wear houses, which now the designers have got to be replaced. And the money managers, and, the owners of the companies who have had a great revenue for a certain amount of time, suddenly see that everything is now changing, and they're trying to work out how to take it on and make it exist for 100 years. I mean, for example, Balmain was very unusual. I mean, Oscar used to design at Balmain. Could you imagine?
Yes, I remember. I used to see the shows.
I mean, he did haute couture then. I mean, how much has that changed? It's extraordinary. So all these houses can go through many, many different lives. And I think, I was talking about the Malays in the fashion business, they're sort of selling, there's more and more brands, and there's only a finite amount of customers, and they're all selling a bit less and less and less. So what's the next step? The next step is you have to find the right designer. So, for example, with Peter, even though I thought he was the right designer, maybe the owners didn't think that, so had to cut their losses immediately. I know when Raf left, it was a mutual thing. He wanted to leave and go before it. He was sort of turned into it was too late, and it destroyed his life, and he destroyed Dior in return. He had maturity to do that.
But don't you think, Stephen, that things have changed also, because we grew up in a time where the brand was stronger, also because it was the name of the person who founded it and they were still there, and it was a different time. There was fewer brands. Now I don't think the brand is stronger than its designer.
I disagree with that.
I think people follow the designer. I'm not sure if tomorrow Olivier Rousteing, and I'm not a fan, leaves Balmain. Not sure he's going to be as successful.
I think you're right that the media and fans follow the designer, but I do think brands themselves are trying to make the brands. I think post Galliano at Dior, I think brands are so keen to exert their dominance over the designer, you know, that we are like...
Yeah, but they changed their clientele. I remember when Nicolas left Balenciaga, and I was wearing his stuff at Balenciaga, and once I was walking past the store in Mount Street, and the salesperson came out, and I'm like, sorry, not really fan of what Wang is doing. Said, oh, don't worry, we have a totally different clientele. So they were still doing good or bad or whatever, but it was a different brand and it was a different customer. So I think the customers follow the designer they like. Do you think that Gucci has the same customer
I don't know
today as yesterday? Don't think
but
so.
then
No.
I think it must to an extent, because the couture clients must hang around through all these design changes. So I think we overemphasize how many people do know like what designer is at what house. I think the girl who maybe bought definitely accessories like Dior bag or something like that wouldn't have known that it was a different designer.
Yeah. I know Monsieur Arnaud still receives letters for Mr. Dior.
Really?
Yeah.
That is so funny.
But I think they do know today with social media, and I think they
Well,
do.
some of them. I think if it's an
People that
Olivier
spend
or
£2,000 on a
Alessandro.
bag, especially if they're young, come on, they would pretend.
But then
that
I think that
they bought it
think about
from
Mulberry.
the designer directly.
Think about Mulberry. Think about how successful those Mulberry bags are with, like, you know, if
Where?
you speak to so many girls who want, no, but in England, like, it's like the staple, like, 21st birthday present, you get a Mulberry bag. I think, and they all obviously love that bag, they're obsessed with the fact that Alexa Chung has it, what have you. I don't think any of those girls who obviously, like, their parents have spent that much money or they spent that much money on those bags would have a fucking clue who designs at Mulberry or what the heritage of Mulberry. They
Probably
don't know.
with Mulberry, but first of all, couture. I don't think someone buys a 60 grand frock.
No, I think
without
couture,
knowing
they
the
definitely
designer.
know. Couture, they definitely know.
And they want the sketch with the
Yes.
blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, with love.
But
from
I also
Ricardo.
think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
the majority now, in this time and age of digital know-it-all, people know who Alessandro Michele is. It's even a difficult name to pronounce if you don't speak Italian. People know maybe not who Coca is, but they will, you know, it's just done one collection.
But also, I mean, the numbers of people who read like Business of Fashion, you know, the sort of young students or aspiring to be students or those who are interested in fashion, I think the information is out there.
Or watching us now.
But it's interesting
You know, it's
to
really
think of that.
important.
You're right,
Yeah.
actually. Like, I was interested to see, like, Sunday supplements doing pieces about business people, and you think, hey, like, this isn't like a fashion title like the Business of Fashion. This is a Sunday supplement, but obviously people are interested in kind of that backstory, and that is, and I think maybe it was interesting we were talking about Bettman before we went live, but I think that's also like the collective and clique around that. People are interested in everyone who makes that up, not just the designer, and that's quite fascinating. I
think also the other thing that for me that's quite interesting looking at couture at the moment, just thinking about some of the shows, so you've got the sort of Vetements, Margiela, you know, Galliano at Margiela, you've got a sort of particular look that's evolving, and then you've got the more classic interpretation, you know, the Elie Saabs or Dior or whatever, sort of feminine. So you've got and you think that maybe again the idea that the couture show, so many different people were invited because it's trying to appeal to a different type of audience.
Yeah.
It's not just the traditional 50-something, it's the younger kids who want the Vetements or, you know, want John Galliano's Margiela. I think that for me was one of the most interesting things, was to think actually,
speaks
whereas
to
couture I was always interested, but actually it was for a client that I wasn't so interested in myself.
But
to know
don't
about.
forget, I mean, the bottom line that apart from the handful of customers who are going to be paying £60,000 for a dress or £100,000 for a ball gown, there's still perfume and handbags and shoes and scarves and sunglasses to sell, and the name through the couture shows is being absolutely splashed all over social media to millions and millions of people. So there's a lot of business to be earned on the back of it.
But also the mainstream media, like the dailies,
Yes.
they all talk about Peter Copping leaving Oscar de la Renta. So even my mom knows that, and she doesn't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So everybody, it's not only social media; it's also that fashion has entered the daily language of
And also
everybody.
designers are celebrities now.
Designers are
That is really-
celebrities.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
recognised in restaurants.
Michael
absolutely.
Kors, as you were talking
Yes,
about,
oh,
in
yes.
particular.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, the John Galliano, I think this, I mean, for me, what was exciting was the sort of, the way, well, it's just pure Galliano, and
Oh, it was
it was
wonderful.
just
Exuberant.
fantastic, really just wonderful. So really thinking differently about clothes in a way that it isn't,
Yeah.
you know.
I went
it's
back,
very,
in,
very
I
exciting.
went back in time.
Yeah, really,
Tell
yeah.
us about,
Forward in time.
And forward, yes, at the same
Yeah,
time.
at the same time. Yeah.
tell us
yeah.
about it. Did you have a great time?
What are you talking about? The thing is that Margiela, John doesn't come out at the end of the show. And
Yeah.
There's no label inside it, so
Yeah.
it's all incognito.
Yeah.
It's
There's no label inside it.
No, of course not. No.
Well, apart from the MMM.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Maybe that's
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
possess. That's
Yes.
why.
One thing that is so lovely about this show is the dress that you see on the right. That's a Nick Knight print put onto the dress.
This one
which is-
there?
Yeah, which is obviously really nice because obviously Nick and John Galliano had such an amazing working relationship when.
And that's why they
When
were
he
there. That's
was
why
at
Charlotte
Duel.
went.
Yes.
Yeah, so Charlotte Knight went to the show and he shot, I think it's 10 years of dual campaigns, and it's really nice to see their collaboration sort of resurface, but in such a completely
Very
different way.
interesting.
And
No, there's something about this show which was very relaxed, and John's really hit his stride in this
Yeah.
show.
Yeah,
There's
definitely.
somehow a prettiness and an elegance but an excitement.
Yeah.
That there
And so
reminds me of
powerful.
the parachute collection in Versailles.
In
Do you
Versailles.
remember?
Well, yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
yeah.
He's getting back in great form.
Yeah.
This show was.
I'd be so
Very
what I love
different.
about it is I always think like how amazing to me, like I'm not particularly interested to find out who the woman is that spends the money on the Ellie Saab dress, but I'm fascinated to find out who the woman is who would want to wear Margiela
Margiela,
Couture. Like she
absolutely.
was so fabulous.
Yeah.
And that's kind of amazing because
Amal Clooney. One.
yeah, very
Yeah.
true,
Yeah.
very true. And she's
The what?
fabulous.
Amal.
I love. Do you remember when everyone was writing those things where it was like George Clooney marries like barrister, and then someone wrote that thing that was like esteemed barrister marries actor. And I was like, it was really amazing.
They did it at the Oscar or at the Golden Globe. Tina Fey said, and there's like human right lawyer who's done this and this
Yeah.
and that, and we're all celebrating her husband.
Yeah.
It was very interesting.
I know, it's ridiculous.
And we're talking before about the reality of the reality of the runway versus what people order. And what John's making here is as well the dream, the thing that we all dream about.
Yeah.
We're all wearing simple, ready to wear clothes
Yes.
here, but we all love this
Yeah.
because it is the dream, and that's what people are buying as well when they spend £100,000.
What's interesting as well, with him working for a brand such as Margiela, once he's been freed from the shackles of the perceived idea of a couture collection,
Yeah.
with those kind of, let's say, more conformist shapes, then
Yeah.
he's been able to really go to town with the cutting as well. And
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
exciting for couture,
So
I think,
exciting.
to bring that level of interesting cutting back into couture.
Yeah,
Because it
yeah.
always was there, obviously.
And you don't have to have the hair and makeup.
No,
exactly.
Yes, you do.
Oh yeah, I think
Well, you
you
can have
do.
the hat.
I actually have no idea what the answer to this is, so I don't know if anyone else will know. But how many people collect couture but not to wear, just as like objects or for archives? Is that a
Oh,
thing?
Hamish
People-
Bowles.
It is
Yes.
actually.
Some
yeah.
men
Yeah,
even
yeah,
collect
yeah.
couture.
Definitely at McQueen, we
definitely.
would sell quite a few things to people for their archive.
For their
Yeah.
archives.
And that was
Really?
really fun because
So
then
do
you
I.
could just make it to a sort of shape and size, and you didn't
That
have to
you
spend
wanted.
hours fitting the.
Yeah, that's
No.
so interesting. So you do that as well, people?
Yeah, I mean, people can own yachts or own race horses or, buy fashion or a lovely thing.
Yeah.
People spend their money in different ways.
So because I wrote a piece recently on archives, but I was kind of intrigued because I thought that was something that predominantly happened through the secondary market. So people would buy things like a McQueen couture dress at auction. I didn't know how much they would directly approach the designers or the houses. That's fascinating.
They would.
No,
Yes.
I mean, for me, it's quite an important business, and people will want to have the thing that I show in my collection exactly like that, and they maybe want to have a few versions, but they'll want the signed sketch, and they'll want it in a glass case. And,
Yeah, and they want all the stuff that goes
Yeah,
around it. And
yeah.
do you tend to quiz them? Are they also the kind of people that collect from various different designers, or do you have?
Of course not. Yes, they
Maybe
do.
not millionaires, but
That's
designers.
so
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
what people collect. Like I'm really fascinated by that. I can't remember the guy's
I
name.
mean, it's a bargain in comparison with the painting.
Yeah, completely. And also, you can make so much money if you look at what things are selling for. Like, I spoke to Kerry Taylor about this, and she said that people are realising, like, yeah, it's not a quick way to make money, but if you hold on to things for a long time, they can be very, very, very valuable. And that's really interesting.
Getting back to couture in a kind of roundabout way, and we were talking sort of musical chairs and revolving doors. What about Albert's? Because surely isn't that someone who
As in
desperately
Albert?
needs
It's genius. Yeah.
a house?
Maybe he'll go to Oscar de la Renta.
because he can do feminine. He can do dress.
That's a good idea.
It's a really good idea.
Yeah.
I'm
And
really-
also he's quite
I'm really
keen on
good at
tribal.
this. I came
That's
up-
a very good idea.
Thank you. I also was the person that said that Heide Ackerman should have gone to Lanvin, which would have been perfect,
Yes.
but that
Yeah.
didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I do love what Bouchard does, so that's
But nobody wants to go to Lanvin after what happened.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they've got.
Well, I mean, they
Bouchard.
got someone
Yeah,
now, but
yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
Just
But
as-
yeah, maybe Albert or Oscar. That's a very
Yes.
good
What,
idea.
what has he been doing lately? Does anyone know?
I'm not friends with him. I don't know him.
Cocktails and
holiday?
carriages, from what
Yeah,
I've
having
seen.
the best time, probably.
Is he here in London?
He comes to London quite a lot, yeah.
Shall we talk more about some of the specific shows? It was interesting, Hilary, that you mentioned. You said, you know, there's a perfume to sell, there's a bag to sell, there's sunglasses. Because it is the case for a lot of the houses, you know, your Dior's or your Chanel's. But I'm also interested in the fact that you have people like couture-specific brands. So someone like a Schiaparelli who is showing, or I think that's what's interesting with Ralph and Russo, for example. But what do Schiaparelli? I'm confused by, because I aesthetically quite like a fair few of the pieces, but I can't work out what the brand aim is, because what product is there to shift? There's not. It's not like they haven't. As soon as this kind of all began, I was like, oh, they're definitely going to reissue Shocking straight away, and that'll be. Actually, what does everyone make of? What's your?
I think they don't know either.
What's
Great
your
laboratory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
A
think it's
massive
a big.
creative exercise.
I mean, Bertrand Guillaume, who's the designer there, funnily enough, I mean, it's a small world, was the assistant
Valentino.
at Valentino, and he was Marie Grazia and Pier Paolo's assistant. So they were at this show and you know, clapping him
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And it was a fantastically done show. I mean,
Yeah.
it was quite traditional in that Schiaparelli vein, but they haven't relaunched the perfumes yet,
Yeah.
which I think they're
It's a
definitely
shame.
going to do.
You think they will? That's
Oh, yes, I mean, I think it's been on the cards for quite a while.
Yeah, because I
But-
do think with this, like, yeah, you just think you wonder what the aim is.
Yeah, but
I am
Diego de la
confused,
Valle, who's the owner,
He
you know,
owns Todd's.
who owns
yeah.
Todd's, and Todd's have been going through a bit of difficult times, and they've been rebranding it and stopping doing their ready to wear, aren't
Yes,
they?
yes.
Something like that.
Well, they
And the
stopped.
design
They
is
didn't
gone.
show Todd's.
Yeah.
Facchinetti gone.
Yeah.
But they showed Hogan. They still do Hogan ready to wear. But anyway,
I
I
can't
think
even keep track
Schiaparelli.
of who's still
I
going, who's
understand what
showing
Lou
what.
said. Like I also don't understand it yet.
Is it, do you think,
I-
a sort of vanity, not vanity, I don't mean it
I
in a
don't see-
nasty way, but is it just something wonderful
But it
for
can't be because
Mr. de la Valle
he-
to have a Paris
but
fashion
he's a
brand?
businessman.
Like you collect
I just don't think so. It's
It's like being
not.
a football club owner.
Yeah.
It's not.
Well-
I think Gogo Eskenazi, it is
Yeah.
she loves to do something creative and have that outlet. Yes, potentially it is. But I think if you're a business person,
He
you're
did
not gonna,
this with the Roger Vivier. He put a great designer there. He put a face, Inès de la Frissange, and it worked. He wanted to do exactly the same
With
here.
Farida.
With
Farida.
Farida, it didn't work at the beginning. He couldn't find a designer. He doesn't like to wait to lose money. So as you say, he's a businessman. I
Don't forget what he did with the
understand-
Colosseum.
Exactly, but I don't understand these design. I don't see Schiaparelli the DNA,
No.
But
and
this
I don't
is-
see anything particularly modern.
I think this was much
Come on,
more about
Tom.
the DNA than
Yeah, but not
other
than previous
previous times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Is it relevant? Is it modern? I mean,
But no hats.
No.
And the one thing you
We can
associate with
immediately-
Schiaparelli
It's
is
a
the
hat.
hat.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can immediately give a thumbs down to any collection that doesn't have a hat because
Yeah, yeah.
Stephen's here. Should we talk also about the Chanel show, because it's interesting and you can't really see it in the pictures, but we talked about how all the petit man and
They were there,
the
working,
ladies
yeah.
were there. Oh, good, Brioni. Don't worry, Brett. I thought that was really, really lovely, but it's definitely part of this trend that is happening for kind of emphasising the make that we talked about before, and I think is that just a way to kind of justify why something is so expensive, or is it part of this wider kind of like backstage?
I think it's
obsession
interesting
as well?
in the make. I think that, I mean, certainly you see it, you know, again amongst students, or it's almost that the more digital and online, and you know, the more that you've got your 3D printers and rapid prototypers, people want to know that, you know, it is still beautifully made, and people are fascinated. And
I think
that's
this
certainly
with
I think.
the younger
That's
audience too on social media,
Yeah.
who perhaps don't understand or don't have a real appreciation of exactly what goes
What
on,
goes on, yeah.
in an atelier, and just how many woman hours and people hours it takes to put something together by hand.
I think it's really good for the industry, actually, because
Yeah,
I mean,
for
I think we
sure.
always say, there are so many jobs in fashion,
Yeah.
and to actually see that and to realise that it's always a collaboration. It's you've got we've been talking about these designers, but actually without all of
I think
all of
that
this, it
Carl
doesn't happen.
is probably the top marketeers
Yeah, he
ever
is.
existed
Yeah.
on the planet, and since everybody, as you say, is talking about it took X hours and X hands and X meters of fabric, he said, you know what? Okay, you're all talking about it. I'm going to do it because I can.
Yeah.
And I think he was genius. I
Yeah.
think he
It's
just had an
fantastic.
idea and he did it perfectly.
Yeah, and the dummies were there, and the people in the white coats.
He always
It
reflects
was
what people are talking
beautiful.
about.
It
So
was-
I wonder what's going to be the next one.
It
but-
felt very appropriate for the times as well, because if you think he has done these huge spectacles that
On Cuba
would
and
probably
Brazil.
feel quite, even just the sets, I mean, would probably feel
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
obscene in current climes, whereas this felt very intimate, and it felt quite humble and very small.
But
And I
the
think
last
that
ready to
felt
wear was an extreme. We were all sitting on couture chairs, remember?
I didn't go to the last.
When I was there, you were probably there as well. It was like thousands. We were thousands of people,
Yeah.
all front row, couture chairs, couture atelier, white carpet. That's it. And it's
Which is very
typical
different to having like a
90 look.
huge globe or like some of
Exactly.
the other stuff that
And then he did couture look there. And then here he brought the atelier. I think he's a genius.
But it's also, how fashion goes. A few years ago, it was very much about, like Sterling Ruby, art and fashion collaboration. And then Carl goes into, well, the art is actually the making of the clothes.
Yeah.
And the clothes are art themselves. They don't need to be linked onto anything else.
That's interesting. Yeah.
The
Totally
artisan
true.
aspect, the
Yeah.
craft, the handcraft.
No, really, the art of clothes.
Yes.
I mean, I know he says it's not art,
Yeah.
but it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't his resort show called something like that?
Métier d'art.
Métier d'art.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, that is what's
We
always
can even see
interesting
a
about.
sketch there.
yeah.
Yeah,
They're really there.
Yeah.
He
They're
brought
so
everything.
fantastic.
sweet. I love it.
But also, I really like the collection. I
So
don't
do I.
always
Yeah.
like Chanel, to be honest.
I do think
but
I'm-
I really like this one.
I think Sam McKnight with the hair
Yeah,
as well,
yeah,
like
yeah.
genius.
Yeah.
It's like Sam is on my mind at the moment because obviously they're opening the Somerset House Sam
Yeah.
McKnight exhibition. But like I think this show particularly, he's so good. Like he really ties it all
Yeah.
together. I love it. I think it's amazing. So was it a strong couture? I'm conscious we haven't spoken about Fendi. I would like to speak about Brioni because that kind of sums up all of the conversation we're having at the moment about like changing nature of fashion. It's interesting we're talking so much about craft and fashion as art, and then you see at Brioni someone who is effectively a street style star, albeit a very
Still
successful
is.
buyer.
He hasn't become a designer.
Getting a
or
design job, and that seems so removed to the conversation we were just having about these amazing women who have this amazing craft. Like, what do we think of that appointment? What's your take, Stephen?
Well, he was a client. I mean, that's the ultimate thing. And he's just made the clothes that he would wear himself. and just put them on
It was
the
very
runway.
much made in
Yeah.
his own image,
absolutely.
wasn't it?
So it's simple in a way. I mean, I don't know where he's going to take it next because it does need to move on.
Yeah. Do you think that it's bad for fashion that we're seeing people like it's almost an extension of the celebrity designer thing, isn't it? It's basically street style designer and.
I'm a little
Worries
bit in
me.
shock.
Think back to Lindsay Lohan.
Yeah,
Lohan.
but hold on.
Laura.
This is Brioni.
Right.
This is just tailor maker.
Oh,
This is a
dear.
suit maker. This is like, I'm not saying that those brands don't have to modernize and get ahead a little bit, but this is, I don't know, I think it's shocking. And the show shocked me a little bit
Do you not
because
like
I
it?
wonder, well, it's not that I like it or not, it's him in different style and forms. What next? I think sustainability in the long term, but I might be wrong, but I don't know. I don't think that, especially for such a classic brand, you can, take a street style.
That
makes
looks like
sense.
Make them into a
Penelope.
designer. I mean, I talked to some designers that are doing this. They're like, it's a job. It's not really a joke.
But Brioni was the most classic menswear. Like, if you wanted to buy
Yeah,
a Cuna suit, you went to Brioni. And they know that their young clients are not buying suits in the way that they used to, so they've got to move on. And in 20 years' time, they have to find a new aesthetic,
Right.
which
I
is
think
not
that's what
about
it's about.
tailoring.
No.
Of course, it's
Yeah.
about that. But I also believe that, and I'm telling, I'm another Brioni is a client of mine, but I'm telling there, you have to lose a few of yours and take the risk to get some new ones. But this is extreme. This is completely extreme. So
So you don't think? Do you think it's
Good
sustainable?
luck.
Do you think it?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's too early to say. And what would I know? I don't have
do
the
think
crystal
it's
ball.
a
But it's a bit
combination,
shocking.
isn't it? We talk about this idea of like having to move with the times, which I really agree with, and I get really annoyed when people are kind of like willfully sort of, it's too much better, like in the old days. I think it is important that people speak to how young men are buying suits today, but then I also think there's a responsibility to also maybe try and shape how young men are buying suits today. And if it's the case that, you know, then they aren't interested so much in fabrication or cut, and it's much more about image and surface. Maybe the job of a house like Brioni isn't to just go fully in that kind of direction and just try and cater to that. It is to say, well, we're going to try and actually change the way young men are buying. And it's really hard to do.
Well, the reason that Brioni made sense was in the 50s and 60s, which was Brioni's heyday. In the 70s, all men had to wear suits, especially for business.
Yeah.
Now men don't. So, you know, the only time that fashion makes sense is when it's right for the times. In a way, the suits and formal dressing and what Brioni did are not right for the times. So,
That's very true.
yes, you can tell men you should be wearing this.
Many suits are still sold.
Oh, yeah.
You know, for
absolutely.
many millions.
Yeah.
So there are still men that have or want to buy a
But
suit.
can
But I
they
do
afford the price of a Brioni suit? That's the important thing.
And I do
The
think that
million
is going to
suit
change.
would need to wear
The
one.
suit won't.
Probably not.
But in a way, it's not a suit that you buy because you've got to go to work. It's actually a suit to make a statement. And in a way, I always think traditional Brioni was much more discreet and so on. But it is taking it in another way, and it reflects the sort of interest in menswear and the fact that there's a big expansion of.
It doesn't feel young though. That's what I do agree with. We were all saying about attacking like a younger audience, but the campaign is like Metallica. I'm like, it's weird.
It makes no sense.
But, you know, I mean, Brioni have shops all around the world, but they offer a bespoke service. And, you know, before they used to do London, Paris, Rome, Chicago, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles. Now there's less places in America, and they're going to, you know, Shanghai, Beijing, Bangkok, Osaka, all those places. And so
Seoul.
and so they're more attuned to what people want to wear, and often they want to wear party clothes.
So is this on the official schedule?
No, it wasn't.
I was going to say, 'cause
yeah.
Just took a slot in Paris,
Yeah.
but
I mean, it's
that
a
was also weird. I mean, when you put Metallica in your campaign and you come out with a tank top, and I don't know, what does it have to be to Paris and Couture Week?
I think
Just
it was
to be
very,
noticed.
very
Yeah.
clever. If you'd have
To
shown
be
during the
noticed.
menswear alongside like peers or not maybe peers, people would have really called him up. But to separate yourself from the rest of the menswear and show a menswear collection makes a lot of sense. Imagine trying to show after like Kim at Vuitton.
Yeah.
Were there a lot of
But
celebrities?
that's when you're self-assured. That's when you know you're doing the right
Yeah.
thing.
But
that's my problem.
Somebody did say to me, "Oh, has Metallica released a new album called Brioni?"
But I think the point that you're making about
It'd be
the
fantastic.
the Asian market is
Maybe they
really
will.
interesting, because it is the you know, think about something like MCM, for example.
Yeah.
For me, it's a bit like, where are you expecting some of the men or people to buy these clothes? And I think
Yeah.
it has, the aesthetic is different.
Yeah, but then
Maybe
I
more relevant
also
there.
do think that brands who pitch themselves too strongly
Look.
towards a particular
Oh, yeah,
market, it does look like an album, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Brands who pitch themselves too much to a particular
It's sort of-
market.
It's the Shades of Queen and. You know,
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
he redesigned the logo. Like that,
Yeah.
it is a bit of a Saint
It's a
Laurent.
gothic.
yeah, Saint Laurent, yeah.
But yeah, sorry, I was going to say that brands that try and do like too much, like we're going to go for the Asian market, we're going to go for the South American new luxury, blah, whatever. I think that is as much of a short-term strategy. as-
Totally agree.
Because I think
Yeah,
it is
agree.
really dangerous to do that. Because you might make loads of money over the next 10 years, but
Over the next 10 months.
Yeah.
No, but
That's
I-
the problem. The
Yeah,
short-term
yeah.
strategy
Yeah.
can kill you.
yeah, exactly.
10 years is long-term today.
And heavy
It's
metal
huge.
rockers don't wear suits, do they? I mean, not
Telling it like
often.
it is.
But that's what he want. I mean, that's what he want to say. He can say suit can be rock and roll or heavy metal or whatever,
Yeah.
you know.
Wow.
But my
It's
problem
like
is
John
that
Varvatos,
my
so
problem
weird.
is
That's
that
what I-
they're
that's what it
trying to
reminds
be
me.
too hard.
Yeah.
And of course, we're here discussing it and they've been noticed, but it's a tiny bit too hard for me.
Yeah.
It's
Yes,
not.
you wonder what
like
the established
Yves Saint Laurent,
customer
you know,
base
It's a different
thinks.
thing.
Yeah, but they're probably so established. They're probably so committed to it as a brand that they probably don't even care.
Oh, they haven't even
Probably
noticed.
don't notice.
They haven't
So
noticed.
Yeah.
Haven't noticed.
you
Not
not
that
think?
established, not that big. There's still Zegna's that it's 5 times bigger. There's still Canali, which is 2 times bigger.
No,
It's
I don't mean the
they're not
brand
that
is established. I mean the man who already buys a Brioni suit. I think men are creatures of habit, and it's like if you buy your suit and you know that it fits you. Like I'm thinking of like someone like, I don't know, like my dad or someone like that. Like if he went and bought something and he liked it and it fitted him well, he'd go and buy it again. He's not going to be like, oh, they've used Metallica in the campaign, I'm going to stop buying it. I think actually...
Well, if you went in and he can only find a chinchilla coat with a...
He'd just rebrand and become really,
No, I
really
don't
like...
think so.
They'll still sell
Yeah,
the
but
other
if they had a
stuff
run-
anyway.
They will.
They
So
will.
when it comes to that other
Yeah.
conversation,
Absolutely,
bit,
buy
yeah,
a chinchilla
Yeah.
coat. That would be the first thing that's sold.
Yes.
I mean, that's what happens in
I
Tom
mean, I know-
Ford.
Go
It's a
down.
sable
Yeah.
full-length coat which sells first.
I know the behind the scene men markets a little bit for a job I've done for a few years. Not that easy. In that sector, not that easy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't want to mention things that I shouldn't be mentioned, but in that sector of fashion, not that easy. So I wish them well, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but if Stefano Pilati didn't work at Zegna and it was spectacular what he did, I don't see how this can work. And Zegna are bigger and more powerful, and he's a great designer.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
So I don't know, it's not that easy. That's the most traditional market. People get shocked from a window that looks a little bit different. They're not all as cool as the guys around us here. They're
But then they
bankers
have
that
to
wear
move forward.
grey.
Brioni have to move forward, don't they?
Yeah.
Because so that's the difficulty.
So maybe they will conquer a totally different environment. Maybe they will make money, but I can't wait to
headbangers.
see it.
Yeah. Well, do you know Celeb and
The
Private Eye?
headbangers.
There they are.
Sorry, what did you say?
Celeb and Private Eye.
So funny.
But
So
it's-
what
yeah.
do we think of as a couture week as a whole? What did we think? So specifically, like the design seems to have given us a lot to talk about, but I just feel like it's so hard at the moment, and it is a thing that's a problem. Is it's so hard even as a journalist who loves writing about clothes to focus on the clothes, because you do feel just so concerned by everything that's going on around it all. How brands are gonna continue, how young designers are gonna find a place. Designers' welfare, like issues to do with sustainability and the ethics, because you see so much clothing and you're like, this feels so wasteful. And it's a strange season in a way, wasn't it? Because it's such a weird time for fashion.
Seismic.
Yeah. Fashion is even more newsworthy than before. I mean, that's
I think it
why we're
reflects
talking about it.
yeah.
People are so concerned about behind the scenes what's going on, all these different subjects you mentioned, as well as, are we showing long or short this season?
And I think it just reflects how unsettled things are generally, as we were saying earlier about other aspects of the industry, but also generally the economy not being, right, globally, all of those sorts of factors. I think it's
This struggle between young and old.
It is, and I think it's very
different
difficult for
ideas,
something like couture. If things are, which we know politically, there are all sorts of things going on and so on. It's very, for something like couture to have a relevance then when things are unsettled. I think it needs to reflect and experiment what's going on, and that's what I found quite interesting. So yes, the clothes were there as some beautiful ideas, but it's also questioning itself, which I think was good.
But isn't it less wasteful? Meaning, the collections are, as you said, made to measure, made to order. So at least it's not thousands of pieces that go out and
yeah,
will
thrown
never be
away.
sold.
Thrown away.
Oh yeah,
Exactly,
it's
no, I
definitely
agree.
better.
I agree.
Definitely better than that. I think it's an interesting time. I think, you're seeing so much kind of populist stuff doing very, very well. So, whether it was the Leave vote and this idea of almost like an anti-expert, anti-intellectual kind of a thing gaining traction at the moment. And I think that is having an interesting effect on fashion, where people... it feels quite out of step with the spirit of the times in some way, and that's kind of interesting. I felt that a lot of the shows, I think a lot of journalists felt kind of almost a little bit like they were forced to think about how elite or kind of in some ways irrelevant some of the stuff that we were talking and writing about was, and that's interesting, I think, to see how that, because you want to get back to times where style and fashion, but more importantly style, feels like really accessible and like something that everyone can engage with, and how important your image can be. But I feel like that's quite
How would
upset
that
with
be
moods.
if you didn't have the sort of pinnacle of fashion, if you didn't have that wonderful artistry and the opportunity to really create anything and use techniques that just aren't accessible at ready-to-wear level. You know, the way that you have to layer up fabrics to create a shape, or the amount of man hours in beading something, and you know, everyone's paid, well, hopefully properly for it. And I know that many, you know, companies are also trying to work on a fair trade level with their sort of factories or their suppliers. And if you didn't have that, what would ready-to-wear become? I mean, I'm not saying that it's a huge influence on ready-to-wear, but just the fact that those techniques exist and they're still being developed and, you know, modernised, I think it would be a huge shame if it wasn't there.
Yeah, I
so then what would
agree.
ready-to-wear be like? You know, so would it be relevant, but it would all be sort of very, you know, egalitarian and nothing sort of exciting?
Yeah.
I mean,
I
there
think
is something
haute couture
exciting,
is
but
like
you know,
Everest, and most of us just kind of climb a hill.
That's a really
I
good
like
note
that.
to end on.
It's a very good metaphor. Yeah.
No one's going to beat that. Well done. That was a nice drop.
It's interesting. I think a lot of young people are really interested, young designers I'm talking about, are really interested in the techniques of couture and how to use them, what they can do in a more democratic way in terms of the people they work with, or, you know,
But I mean,
sourcing.
people beyond the fashion system. It's like, how do you get those people back to not just thinking, oh, this is like...
Well, that's where I think Carl showing it in the way that he did is one of the things that happens.
Yeah, it's so important. It is, because I do think, most of us will never be able to afford anything like this, but it is so joyful to draw inspiration from it and be excited by it and marvel at the craft. And you want, in the same way you want people to go look at art in museums and you want them to enjoy reading novels, you want people to engage with that. And I hope that is something that
it's like, it's the same dynamic between high jewellery and then what's done as a collection. You know, you've got the unique piece designed around a stone that makes everybody dream and 5 people being able to buy it in the world, and then that inspires collections that are still expensive because it's not cheap, but they are more viable, and it should be the same. Actually, it's not really, because nobody designs their ready-to-wear collection following the ideas that were shown in couture.
No, they don't.
So it's a little bit different,
perhaps
right?
because it's an idea and it's something that's there. As you say, they're not necessarily going to be designing from something that they've seen in the couture, but still the fact that it exists and the techniques are still being
It's
developed.
important, yeah.
And not
You
even
design
develop,
couture
but,
only,
but
right?
protect it. Develop. Like, I think it's not just that the techniques are developed; it's the fact that there's a place where they can still be used, because that's really scary. If you think some of those makers, you know, if there wasn't a market for them that comes through couture, you know, what's going to happen to massage embroidery?
Well,
I think
it's
it's terrifying, and that scares me.
But
Yeah,
I
because
think,
they're artisans and they have amazing skills.
but I think things can be developed for ready-to-wear. And, for example, these 3 Chanel
Yes,
outfits.
definitely, with a company like Chanel that then has its own
And you know,
ready-to-wear line.
I'm sure other high street labels are looking at this, and yes, we can do that by digitally printing it or sticking on sequins as opposed to hand sewing them or fusing them.
Or stitching ribbon across. Like ribbon.
Yeah, exactly. That's very true.
So it always flows down and
I
then
really-
ends up on that
To look in the
lipstick
middle is
packaging.
incredible.
Yeah, exactly, and then it all flows down in the end. It would be interesting to do a tour of high street retailers and look at the number of knockoffs that you see and see if you can actually see any knockoffs that are of couture garments.
I'm sure. I mean, there's a couple of lapel cuts from Chanel, which was when there was like a little V cut in there and then it was folded back, which was completely genius, and I've never seen anything like that before. And I hope the people at Zara are going to feature that.
If you're listening, that's a good idea.
Okay, maybe we should end on that tip. Should we give all the designers a round of applause for giving us so much to talk about?
Yeah.